Good morning. My name is Tim. I'm one of the elders here at the church, and it is my pleasure again this Mother's Day to bring the message to you. And I also would like to say Happy Mother's Day to all of our moms and to all of our women and young women who are, many of which, moms in the making. Okay, so you're in training right now for this great day that will be given in your honor someday down the road, Lord willing. Somebody said it takes about 6 weeks to get back to normal after you've had a baby. Somebody doesn't know that once you're a mother, normal is history. Somebody said, you learn how to be a mother by instinct. Somebody never took a 3-year-old shopping. Somebody said, you don't need an education to be a mother. Somebody never helped a 4th grader with math. Somebody said, you can't love the 5th child as much as you love the 1st child. Somebody doesn't have 5 children. Somebody said, a mother can find all the answers in a book. Somebody never had a child stuff beans up his nose. Somebody said, the hardest part of being a mother is labor. Somebody never watched her baby get on the bus for the first day of school or leave in a car for college. Somebody said, a mother's job is done when her last child leaves home. Somebody never had grandchildren. And somebody said, your mother knows you love her, so you don't have to tell her. Somebody isn't a mother. You know, as Christ walked the streets of Jerusalem and along the shores of Galilee, he often spent part of a day or night in the homes of those who followed him. For examples, Luke chapter 19, 5 and 6 tells us of Zacchaeus, that little in stature tax collector who climbed up into that sycamore tree to see Jesus, and to whom Jesus spoke these words, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. Or how about Matthew chapter 9, verse 10, when he records just after Christ had called him to be a disciple, he was having dinner in Matthew's house with many tax collectors and sinners who came and ate with him and his disciples. And how can we forget that moving encounter of Christ with the two on the road to Emmaus, who invited the risen Lord and urged him to spend the evening with them in their home, as Luke 24:29 tells us, so he went in to stay with them. But with all the various times we find Christ spending part or all of a day or night in people's homes, we rarely find him visiting the home of the same person more than once, except for the 3 separate times he visits with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. So this Mother's Day, I'd like for us to examine those 3 separate visits of Christ with them. Let's look at the occasion of his first visit. In Luke chapter 10, verse 38 through 42, we read these words. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." You know, I think there's just a couple things that kind of stand out in this story already. Martha seems to be the only one who knows Jesus is coming home for dinner. She invited him. She opened up their home to him. But it appears that no one else knows what's going on until Martha walks through the front door with Jesus by her side. Now, you know, normally when you invite someone over to eat a meal, don't you usually work ahead of time to make all the preparations and get everything ready? Someone sweeps the floor, another one dusts the furniture, but most importantly, the dinner gets put in the oven to be ready to eat when the guest arrives. So in this first visit, we see that nothing has really been done in preparation for Christ's visit. And no one other than Martha seems to even know that Christ is coming for dinner. So Martha busies herself in the kitchen with all the last-minute preparations that need to be done, hurriedly done, you see, in order to feed Christ a nice meal with something to eat. And Mary is perfectly content to let her, while she sits at Jesus' feet listening to what he has to say. Well, it doesn't take very long, does it? Until Martha, probably the older of the two sisters, complains that she's all by herself in the kitchen doing all the work. And Mary, who's likely the younger of the two sisters, and maybe always seems to be able to get out of doing any work, is in the living room watching TV or playing video games or something like that, right? Now, I'm sure that nothing like that ever happens in your home, right? No sibling rivalry. No one trying to get out of helping and do their part around the house, right? No one person who seems to have all the responsibilities placed on their shoulders to see that all the work gets done, right? Well, let's make a profile. The profile of Martha would suggest that she is likely the oldest in the family. She's probably an early riser, you know, filled with energy, eager to serve as we see her. Probably gets up, makes her daily plans of what is going to be on her to-do list. She's the one that makes sure everything is clean and everything is put in its place, and the last one probably to go to bed at night. And so her role as provider, her role in the kitchen as the chief cook and bottle washer wouldn't be a very unusual place for her at all. She seems to be the leader. And she really, really, really wants to cook Jesus a 5-star quality restaurant dinner. Now, there's nothing wrong with any of these qualities, just as long as they don't interfere with the more important things in life. So let's make a profile of Mary. The profile of Mary would suggest that she is likely the youngest in the family, more of a socialite. She may be sensitive, more calm, more thoughtful, a good listener. In fact, in all 3 places where these visits of Christ is told in the Scripture, Mary is found in exactly the same position. Have you never noticed that? She's at the feet of Jesus. And all 3 times he visits them. She's a good listener. She wants to listen to the Lord and what he has to say. And she's always found in that very same position. And very likely she didn't mind it, at least that Martha was doing all the cooking. Well, after all, wasn't she the one who invited him to come over to eat anyway? But the big question is, what did Jesus mean when he said, only one thing is needed? Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Well, it is believed that Christ's words to Martha really transcend that meal, and it transcends that visit in and of itself, and that his answer probably takes into account what he's been teaching all along in his teaching ministry, perhaps even taking in mind what he said in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, "Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you." You see, doesn't it really boil down to a decision? Doesn't it all come down to making a decision between which one is ultimately more important? Listening to the words of Christ, or whether a meal is ready to eat at a certain time. It's a decision. It's a choice. And we are all faced with such choices. In fact, such choices are a daily part of our life. Choices between what is more needful, what is more important at the time. In the Christian school in LaBelle where I teach, in my high school classroom, there is a banner stretched out for several feet over a couple of windows and a door. And that banner simply says this: "May the choices you make today be choices you can live with tomorrow." And I think that really hits the nail on the head with this first visit of Christ, this experience he had with Martha and Mary, and making choices at that time that are more important. Now let's look at the occasion of the second visit. The second visit is found in John chapter 11. And it's kind of a lengthy passage, but I really want us to get the full effect of this second visit of the Lord. John 11, beginning in verse 1. "Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, 'Lord, the one you love is sick.' When he heard this, Jesus said, 'This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet, when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. Then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews tried to stone you, and yet you are going back there?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? A man who walks by day will not stumble, for he sees by this world's light. It is when he walks by night that he stumbles, for he has no light." After he had said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but the disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas, called Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she told him. "I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who was to come into the world." And after she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and he is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house comforting her noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, "Come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." You know, the occasion of this second visit is the occasion of great sorrow and sadness over the death of a loved one. Unfortunately, many of us have been there. Family members and friends have gathered perhaps at our home, or we have gathered with family and friends and have gone to the funeral homes to share that sadness, to share that sorrow with others, and to offer or receive comfort. But notice the change in profiles here. Martha, again, takes the lead. And she's the one who runs out to meet Jesus. She doesn't invite him home, but leaves him outside the village, running back home to tell Mary that he has come. Martha, in this second visit, is the one who gets the Bible lesson. This week's lesson is on the resurrection. And Mary, guess where she is? She's back at home. Maybe a homebody, likes to be at home. But when she hears that Jesus is near, she runs out to meet Jesus. But there's no contentment. There's no peace, like during his first visit. She falls down at his feet. She is overcome with sorrow. And she is weeping over her brother's death. But they are both in total agreement. "Lord, where have you been? What took you so long? If you would have been here earlier, our brother would not have died." The occasion of the third visit, the next chapter in John. John chapter 12 and the first 3 verses we read. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus arrived at Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Notice the profile changes in this first encounter, this third encounter with the Lord. Notice that the dinner was given in Jesus' honor. This time, he was invited, an invited guest. He was expected by everybody. They knew that he was coming. There's no surprise visit this time. Notice that all the preparations have also been made. Martha did what she loved, and no doubt what she did best. She had worked in the kitchen and even served the meal to everyone as they were seated around the table. Mary, she did what she loved and what she probably did best. She worshiped the Lord, and she was found at his feet, and she anointed him. But there's no arguing. Everyone is doing what they love to do. Everyone is doing what they probably each do best. And they are quite content with that. All is well in the home of Mary and Martha and Lazarus. As our praise team comes to lead us, I want to draw a conclusion here. I guess we could say that the moral of the story of these three encounters, these three visits of the Lord with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, maybe it could all be summarized in this statement: what a difference Christ makes. But I don't think that would be accurate. I think that perhaps in reality, we might better say, what a difference death makes. You know, it seems that it may have taken the passing of Lazarus for them truly to realize just how precious life is. Have we not all found that to be true? When a loved one or a close friend has suddenly been taken from us, that it's in that moment, if nothing else, what we realize more than anything is how precious life is. How special indeed is spending time with family. And how completely uncertain from moment to moment our life really is. Listen, family members, life is too short and death is far too real for us to complain and argue our lives away. So let's just do what we each love to do and what we each do best. Let's worship the Lord, yes. And let's serve Him, yes, but together in our homes today. Let's pray.